Hello and welcome to another edition of The Tigers Down Under. I'm your host, as always, Alex, and with me today I have Dan. How are you, Dan?
Yeah, I'm all right. How are you?
Good, good. It was an interesting result because I suspect before the game started we would have taken a point away at Birmingham, but the manner in which we secured that point was probably a little bit frustrating. So, how did you feel? I guess start with the first half because that was probably the most positive aspect of the match from our point of view. How did you feel about that first half, going in at halftime 2-0 up?
Um, I sort of had to just check that I wasn't asleep and dreaming or that I wasn't watching the wrong game, because it it just was like chalk and cheese compared to the game the week before.
Yeah.
It blew me away. How good we looked. It was like almost like watching us in that first half of the season again. We had purpose, we had intent, you know, lovely play. Particularly for the second goal, I thought that was some really good work and a great finish for his debut goal. Um, but yeah, it really took me by surprise. I think I mentioned last week that I really wasn't expecting, based on the Charlton game, I wasn't really expecting a lot out of the game against Birmingham. But uh, the way that they seemed to approach the game, and particularly the first half, and they really took it to Birmingham, and probably could have even had a couple more. We had a few decent chances. Yeah, I think a little bit of shock was probably my main reaction to that first half.
Yeah, I think everyone was pretty startled with the fact that we came out of the blocks so fast, and really we almost could have had a goal straight from kickoff. I think it was Kane who played the ball through for Wilkes, who couldn't quite get a shot away and probably should have shot first time, but that would have almost got us off to the perfect start. But of course, it was Magennis who then opened the scoring after only 2 minutes. I don't know. Was it straight from a corner, or was it? It was certainly, at least, it was the result of a corner play, which was great to see because we haven't been able to get many of those goals this season. And then, of course, yeah, as you mentioned, the Scott goal. I think this kid's exciting. He's quite an exciting player, and he's looked really good in his first game for us against Charlton, and then even better against Birmingham, where. When we recruited him, it was sort of seen as this Bowen replacement, and the hope was that he'd be able to progress in a similar way to how Bowen did for us. And I guess if you're looking ahead to next season with the potential for Keane Lewis Potter on one wing and Scott on the other, all of a sudden things could actually be pretty exciting for City. We might have a couple more pretty strong wingers in our squad.
Yeah, I think he just has. I guess he's just a little bit, I don't know, youth and just full of enthusiasm, and he's been just Scott. He's just been willing to. I think just he really wants to try and get in behind, and he really wants to attack the ball and attack the goal. And it's just been, I think, realistically, as well as Wilkes and Bowler have played at times, we really haven't seen that really direct, aggressive approach since we had Grzycki and Bowen. So it's a nice change.
And then, as I sort of alluded to it, but it was really an impressive display from Magennis. And I've probably been a pretty harsh critic of his over the season because he hasn't looked too prolific, and I suppose neither has Eves, but at least Eves seemed to be offering a lot more around the ground. But in this game against Birmingham, Magennis was great. He obviously was providing a huge goal threat early in the game, but also his commanding, his control of the game and his control of our shape was pretty evident. And I think Phil Buckingham even tweeted that after Magennis got subbed off, he was still the loudest voice in the stadium, yelling out instructions to the players from the sidelines. So he's clearly taken on this role of one of those. I think he's our oldest player in our squad, so certainly taking on that position as our one of our leading figures, if not actually the captain. So that was a really surprisingly positive display from him.
Yeah, I think they sort of. I was just thinking last week I sort of said that McCann was maybe not demonstrating a lot of tactical nous in the last 6 months since January, but I think just those couple of changes that he made to the 11 for the Birmingham game, it would be hard to, particularly in the first half, to call them anything other than almost a masterstroke because, as you say, Magennis was highly influential, bagged a goal, was involved in a lot of good play, was vocal, was commanding, held his position, helped City keep their shape. Lopez is the other one that came in and had a great game. Set up the Scott goal with a brilliant cross, but just he really impresses me for a guy who is so young, has never played like at this level, and was one of those ones where everyone goes, at the beginning we're going another guy that we brought up from the lower leagues with how is he going to go? But he has just this season come on in leaps and bounds, and I thought another really impressive performance from him.
Yeah, and it's always interesting with those sorts of players where obviously you can bring in players who hit the ground running and obviously a step above everyone around them, and you can bring in players who are really quite crap, but it's always really promising when you see guys who come in, and he wasn't crap by any stretch of the imagination when he came in. Obviously didn't have great reviews from Wigan, but he came in and he's really markedly improved over the season, and he's gone from being, like you said, another League One signing. Yes, okay, he's a decent enough player, sort of on the caliber of somewhere between Batty and Stewart, to all of a sudden just being, probably I wouldn't, maybe he is our best player, and most valuable player as well. So, like you said, like that cross for Scott was just like inch perfect, and at a better run club, as much as Ehab wants to say we're the best run club in the championship, at a better run club, I would be getting out, an extended contract at better terms for Lopez and trying to secure him, if not for the long term, at least secure or give the club the security that if he is to move on, we're going to get a decent fee out of it.
Yeah, I think Lopez is starting to remind me a little bit of like Sam Clucas, to be honest. He came and we knew that he had some ability. He did some good things, but when Clucas moved into the center of the park out of that wide position, he exploded. And Lopez, it took a little bit to find his feet, but as you say, he was never like particularly poor. But he's now he's really is, I guess, like almost with Magennis on the weekend, but in a broader sense, he's really starting to become one of those leaders within the team. He's leading by example, performing really well on I would say regular basis, but we've just had this huge break. But he's been really impressive recently.
And then I guess, look, it's a bit of a typical City display that we were coming out in the second half full of optimism, full of hope that we might actually secure a win. And of course, we went out and conceded within a couple of minutes from a pretty decent strike from Gary Gardner. But then, and then conceded another goal so that we were 2-2. But then it was Herbie Kane who stepped up with a pretty clever free kick under the wall to give us the lead back. And we then conceded again so that we dropped the 2 points and finished the game 3-3. Just before we talk about the overall impact of the result, Kane, I thought, if we're going to be praising Lopez, Scott, Magennis as well, Kane, I thought, put in his best display in a City shirt by head and shoulders above any of his other displays. And I thought, coming into the club in January, hopes are pretty high. This guy was coming from Liverpool. He'd been playing at Doncaster under McGann previous season. Hopes are pretty high that he'd be a really solid addition to our midfield, and he just didn't show those signs before this game. But if he can put in a few more displays like that game against Birmingham, it's the sort of display that we've probably expected to see from someone like Terrell, and obviously he's been pretty injury prone. So if Kane can sort of provide that alternative and get some more consistency in his displays, then I think he's in for a very good final few games of the season.
Yeah, I think you're right. In regards to Kane, it was a much improved performance, especially after I think I bashed him a little bit last week in the potty.
He heard you. He revved up.
Well, if I can claim the credit, I will. But yeah, I think. Oh, I forgot what I was going to say. Now, you distracted me.
So he had a poor game last week, but he stepped up this week.
I was going to say, I think perhaps just that rotation of the midfield players, because I think this week, what was the starting three? I've forgotten already.
It would have been Kane,
Lopez,
Lopez,
Batty, and Kane. So that means
Batty, yeah.
Kane would Kane have gone a little bit further? Was he a little bit further forward?
Suspect so, yes.
Yeah, so I think maybe that slight positional switch, maybe just allowed him the little bit of extra freedom and a little bit less of the defensive duties, perhaps, and maybe that little bit slight change, for him was what got the best out of him.
And then obviously pretty disappointing result in the sense that, being so close to having the 3 points secured and then to go on and drop 2 of the points. We sort of said that before the game we would have taken the point. Were you able to take that step back and still be pretty happy with the point, or did the game sort of leave you pretty frustrated?
Look, to be honest, it's probably a bit of both. Like, as you say, we sort of said before, like last week, I don't think any of us predicted any sort of result. We were pretty pessimistic about our chances. We played a really good first half, and then it seemed like the second half, Birmingham did their best, City impersonation of our first half, and like almost with this like same minutes in the corresponding halves for the goals. It was pretty crazy how that sort of happened. 4 goals in the same end, two goals in like the second minute of each half, and and one in like this. So that was pretty interesting. I think. Yeah, it was frustrating to have to see the lead, to throw that lead away, particularly once we had gone on to reclaim it after off Kane's free kick. It really. We were getting a bit scrappy, but I was getting feeling a little bit. I was growing in confidence that I thought we might be able to hold on. We seemed to be clearing away, and scrapping by most of those attacks towards the end of the game, and then, but then again, it just all opened up, and you could see it was coming, and it was it was disappointing, and.
I guess it's interesting. It's interesting that in our last 2 games where we've got a result. I think it was the Swansea draw before this, which was 4-4. It's very telling that we're conceding so many goals. It's like we're working so hard to even just get a point in the division at the moment.
Yeah, it's a weird thing because I remember. This is almost like the very beginning of the season. Those first few games, we played really, really well for 60 odd minutes or 70 minutes, and then it looked like we were tiring at the end, and we were saying, this is just McCann's system. There's a lot of, high energy in the system, and it takes a lot out of the players. They'll grow in their fitness, and I don't know whether it's that again, with the pandemic and everything that's happened, and it would have been hard to really maintain that full level of match fitness, but it is a strange sort of phenomenon that we've got going on where we get into the second half, into the back half of games particularly, and we just seem to find a way to concede goals.
Yeah, I think I saw a stat that said, I can't remember if it was 12 games or something like that, where we've taken the lead and then failed to win the game. But another stat that I saw was that in our last 10 games, we've conceded 29 goals. The next worst in the division is 18 goals. So, I think that sort of underlines our defensive fragility at the moment. And look, we'll talk about the Borough game in a second, but it'd be great time to get a clean sheet and grind out a gritty 1-0 win. That would be fantastic. Before we move on to that Borough game, though, it's probably worth a mention of the teams that are around us in the table at the moment, because it's getting incredibly tight. I think it's 5 points separating last place and 17th or something like that. And obviously with this morning's results, where Stoke have lost to Wigan and Luton have drawn with Leeds, Barnsley have beaten Blackburn, so they're all picking up points as teams beneath us, except for Stoke, obviously, just above us. losing to Wigan. And then Huddersfield lost to Forest on Sunday as well, which is a positive for us. It's kept us out of the relegation zone, but we're out of the relegation zone on goal difference. So how are you feeling about the sides around us and their form or lack of form, as is the case for some of the teams?
Um, I think, yeah, look, we're really in amongst this is just a real, relegation survival battle. I think, you know, it, sometimes it's really clear, it's really clear cut, at this stage of the season who's going down and who's going to stay up. But I think just the break, I guess, has given everyone a chance at a time where they normally wouldn't have the chance to take stock, to review, have they've essentially got a mid-season review opportunity where they've been able to go back over everything, and identify their strengths and weaknesses, and try and address those. So I think I would be surprised if all the teams in our little bottom region of the division weren't really pushing and performing as they are. I think it's going to make for an interesting last 7 or 8 games. But yeah, I think it's going to be, it could be any one of those could go down, and any one of us could scrape by to stay in the division.
Yeah, I mean, we're only 2 points ahead of Luton, who are 24th at the moment, and then all the way up to Charlton in 18th on 46 points. There's only a 6-point gap between them and Luton. So getting very condensed. I think you can probably say Birmingham and Reading are safe, but you never really know. If this sort of form continues, then those teams could start to get dragged into it. So very interesting times. I think it's also worth noting that it's pretty impressive from Wigan, who I think were in the relegation zone as recently as February and have strung together something like 10 clean sheets in a row. Of course, having former City man David Marshall for Wigan doing very well there, keeping clean sheets, and they've pulled up to 50 points in 14th. So very, very good job from them as well. So look, it's going to be interesting, and I guess it's going to be a huge game Friday morning for us against Middlesbrough. So I think it's 2 a.m. Australian time. The game is on KO, so it's been selected for television coverage over in the UK. So we'll be able to watch it on KO for those brave enough to get up at 2 a.m. for that game. We've got our game against West Brom midnight on Sunday as well. So it's going to be a tough next few games for City supporters who have work the following day. But we obviously know that Middlesbrough's replaced their manager with Neil Warnock last week and did manage to get a win in their first game under him, 2-0 over Stoke. So it seems that he's starting to galvanise them. He seems to be getting them going. And I think I saw yesterday that they've managed to re-sign to short-term contracts all of their out-of-contract players as well. So apart from Rudy Gested and Daniel Ayala, who have left the club, I think they've pretty much got everyone available, which will help them immensely. But they're 2 points ahead of us. Very, very little to split us on goal difference or anything like that. It'll be a very tight game. How do you see it, Dan? Do you see us having much of a chance of stopping the Warnock bounce?
Look, if we can manage to improve by the same margin, the same degree that we did between the Charlton game and the Birmingham game, then if we manage to repeat that level of improvement, I think we just about blow them away. I think that might be being a little bit too optimistic, but if we could replicate, how we performed at Birmingham with, obviously a couple of little tweaks, maybe a little bit tighter at the back would be great. I don't think this game is out of reach. I think the 3 points are there. This is a game that is absolutely winnable, and we should be targeting all 3 points. I would be satisfied with a point. I would be ecstatic with 3. I'd be disappointed to take nothing from the game.
How do you see our lineup for this game? Do you see McCann sort of probably sticking with the side that started against Birmingham?
I think for the most part, I think we probably would. The only exception to that would probably be Wilkes, unless we can in
Oh,
the
of course,
next.
yeah, he started as well.
Yeah,
So yeah.
unless we can manage to actually. I don't know. Did we run out of time, or do we still have time to activate that?
Well,
The permanent transfer or
I th-
something. I think I
I think
read something that maybe.
yeah, I think it ran out today. So I don't think, if we haven't heard anything from the club, I'll presume that we haven't secured him.
So that would probably be the only thing I'd be looking at. Well, the only position that's probably going to change, barring anyone who's pulled up, sore, just about to any degree. I think with how thick and fast these games are about to come, if you're not 100%, I don't care if you're 99.5%, you may as well just have a rest and wait till you're 100% ready to go, because we really can't afford, even with the 5 subs, you don't really want to waste. You don't want to waste a substitution, or have to spend a substitution to replace an injury that potentially could have been avoided.
And especially with the games coming so close together, that what would have previously been, if it's a week or a 2 week injury that would previously have seen you miss 2 or 3 games, it's suddenly turning into 5 or 6 games, and it's almost the rest of the season.
Yeah, it's a whole different sort of kettle of fish at the moment. So, and I guess also with that, I think we've had we've had 5 or 6 days for this game, but then it's only 2 for the next. So I think I would be looking at probably keeping mostly the same sort of squad together for this game against Borough, and then I think would be rotating a bit for the West Brom game on Sunday.
So, yeah, may as well throw the discussion of West Brom in as well, because we'll play them before our next episode. So I guess it's an interesting game to look at, because West Brom have been pretty, flaky, out of form since the season resumed. I don't think they've won a game yet, and are starting to fall off the pace a little bit behind Leeds. So it's going to be certainly an interesting game from that perspective, because it's one that we could potentially view as not a must-win game, because it's not against the side around us, and therefore we could look to rotate a little bit, sort of like you're saying, because it's only a few days later. It's probably worth keeping our players fresh and fit for the games that we can really go out there and win. But in saying that, given West Brom's form, I don't think it's out of the question to be aiming for a point in that game either.
Yeah, I think I guess this is where we generally tend to struggle as a club, is in that depth, and so I think it's unrealistic to expect our first 11 to be able to play on Friday morning or Thursday night there, and then on Saturday night for them, or Saturday afternoon. That's a very short turnaround, particularly with everything that's going on. But yeah, as you say, West Brom's not in a particularly rich vein of form, so I guess that becomes an opportunity. We look at it perhaps like we've mentioned about some other games. It's a bit of a free hit, really.
Yeah.
We get to a few players get the opportunity to stake their claim for a first team position. We go out without a lot of expectation, and it's, as you sort of mentioned, it's not a crucial fixture. We really need to, not that we should dismiss this game, as if we can take points from it, we absolutely should. But those games against those teams around us, because we have quite a few of them in our remaining fixtures, I believe, still is they're the ones, the 6 pointers, so to speak. They're the ones that need. I think they really need our full attention, and then the others are we get whatever we can get out of them, and we take them for what they are, really, and where we are, contextually. It's just the situation that we're in, I think.
Well, yeah, and as you say, sort of when you look at the games that we still have remaining, so after this West Brom game, we will have 5 games left. Of those games, other than the Luton game, Bristol City, Millwall, Wigan, Cardiff, theoretically, we could be playing all of those sides after their seasons have quote-unquote ended, because they haven't been able to make the playoffs. They're pretty safe in mid-table. Of the teams around us, really, that's almost the optimal fixture, really, because you want to be playing sides that aren't fighting for promotion and aren't fighting to stay up. So other than Luton, who are obviously fighting alongside us, and is more of that 6-pointer that you're suggesting, those games against Millwall, Bristol City, Wigan, and Cardiff could be really vital. And I almost got that sense a little bit in the first half that Birmingham, just their heads weren't in the game. Whether or not it was because they just thought they were safe and didn't have a whole lot to play for, I'm not sure. And obviously that was a little bit disproved by their performance in the second half. But it did get me thinking about those sorts of teams where it's, an empty stadium. They're playing in July in hot conditions, June, July, hot conditions. They just might not be up for it. And if they've got nothing to play for, and if we can show a little bit of impetus and a little bit of fight, hopefully that means that we could actually get a few wins.
Yeah, and I think building on that, if you can replicate the fast start that we had against Birmingham, you get against a team that, as you mentioned, may be mathematically safe, then they may not respond in the same way that Birmingham did. They may respond or have less of a response or no real strong response at all. It makes for an interesting run-in that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. So just before we sign off, did you have a score prediction for the two games against Borough and West Brom?
I'm going to go with a 1-0 for Borough and actually a 2-2 at West Brom.
Yeah, it's not too bad. I reckon I could hopefully see a 1-0 against Borough. That's definitely optimistic thinking. And then, against West Brom, it's going to be interesting because obviously we face Grzycki against his old club, but he hasn't played in any of the games since the resumption of the season. So it'll be nice to see if he actually gets on the pitch. Look, I don't think it draws out of the question, and probably a score draw. It just depends on how West Brom go before that, and I think they have. Let me pull that up. Whoever they're playing will be an interesting game. I think it's Sheffield Wednesday, so it's a sort of match where they could get challenged, and if they still aren't able to get the win out of that, then it starts to become a little bit of an issue for them, because even before the season was suspended, they hadn't won since they played Preston back in February. So they hadn't won any of their 4 games in March, or 3 games in March. So in a little bit of a rut, it could be a pretty interesting game. And if we can go to there and put a bit of pressure on, who knows what can happen. So it would be nice to get a bit of a shock result, even if it does end up sort of helping Leeds. I guess that's an unfortunate byproduct, but if it helps our survival, that will be good. So maybe I'll maybe go a score draw in that one as well. But thank you for joining me tonight, Dan.
Not a problem.
And thank you everyone for listening in. We'll be back after these next 2 games, where hopefully we've got a few positive results and can start inching up that table. But until then, come on City. You've been listening to the official Hull City Australia podcast. For more discussion, join us on Facebook in the Hull City AFC Australian Supporters Group, or follow us on Twitter at Hull City AFC Oz. The music was created by Amber and Black.
Going higher and higher. There's no turning back 'cause you're